Good morning, good evening, wherever you are. Welcome back to the Enterprise AI Show. I'm your host, Brian Gracely. And today we've got a fun one. We are going to dig into a couple of topics that we cover a lot on the show, but I don't know that we've necessarily sort of dug into what's it like in reality? And so we're going to do that with both digging into forward deployed engineering as well as harness engineering, and do that with some folks that are building some new cool technology, as well as living this life and sort of understanding what it really means to implement some of these technologies. So some good stuff coming up right after the break.
This episode is brought to you by Outshift, Cisco's incubation engine. AI agents today operate in silos, limiting their potential. Scaling up models isn't enough. We need to scale out. Like humans did 70,000 years ago, agents must share knowledge, goals, and innovation to evolve. Outshift by Cisco is building the Internet of Cognition, transforming isolated AI systems into orchestrated superintelligence. This open infrastructure enables agents and humans to share intent, context, and reasoning. The cognition evolution for agents is here. Learn more at outshift.com. That's outshift.com. Today's show is sponsored by ShareGate. You're out of time. Copilot needs to be deployed ASAP, but your tenant really isn't ready for it. Years of data, permissions, and users lurk in its shadows, ready to be exposed by AI. ShareGate Protect sees it all, so you can find the exposure risks, fix them fast, and deploy AI with confidence. Microsoft 365 Governance, they've got this. Learn more at sharegate.com/protect. Today's show is sponsored by Nasuni. There's a growing gap in AI right now between what's possible in theory and what successfully works at scale inside an enterprise. The difference comes down to unstructured file data. Many AI initiatives struggle because the file data they depend on is scattered, unstructured, and disconnected from where and how work actually happens. Nasuni changes that. It brings your unstructured file data into a single, secure foundation so AI, both generative and agentic, can access it with the context, governance, and performance it needs in production. Bring AI to where your unstructured data lives. See what it takes to activate your data for AI and request a demo at nasuni.com/AI.
We've talked a lot, at least in theory, about a couple of topics that we're going to dive in today, both forward deployed engineer and forward deployed engineering, as well as AI harness and sort of harness engineering, things that we've talked about somewhat. I feel like we've talked about them somewhat in theory. And today we get a chance to dive into talk with somebody who is doing this live, doing this as their everyday day job. And so excited to have Jordan Cab with us, staff forward deployed engineer for AI R&D at Mozilla. Jordan, welcome to the show. Great to have you on.
Yeah, thanks, man. Great to be here. Looking forward to it.
Yeah. So, sort of we get a double bonus. You're also back in the Raleigh area. So we always like to, reach out to folks who are near Aaron and I, and been doing this for a while. So before we dive into kind of what you're doing every day in your day job, as well as some of the cool stuff you're doing at Mozilla, give us a little bit of your background. You've worked in a lot of places, a lot of different roles, but kind of a little bit of your background and then what you're focused on these days.
Yeah, sure. Great to be back in Raleigh. I grew up here, went to school here. Yeah, I've been a software engineer, kind of into computers since I was a little kid, like 12, 13 years old. That's how I got started. I like to joke that I was very much an indoor kid, if you will.
Yeah.
But tried to start a couple of companies when I was like middle school, high school, which is not a great time to do it, but definitely tried. Got kind of burnt out right before college, studied political science, which is kind of a strange twist. I went and worked in politics for a little bit and found out that I much more enjoy tech and having a product rather than working in politics. So after college, went and worked in fintech, social media. I worked for a medical device company that made medical devices for veterinarians. I kind of had no focus, right? I was living in New York at the time. This was 2023. ChatGPT 3, I think, had just come out. And,
Yep.
It blew up the internet, it was all anybody was talking about, especially in my circles.
Right.
So my brother called me, again, this is spring 2023. He had been a consultant at KPMG for a decade, trying to bring machine learning and AI to contracts. And he called me and he was like, hey, I'm going to quit. I'm on the partner track, but I'm going to quit and I'm going to try and start a company and do this on my own using LLMs. Do you want to join me? And I was like, I don't know, going into business with family can be kind of
Sure. Yeah.
Can be dangerous, can be sketchy. I trust my brother. I was like, you know what, I'll build you a demo, I'll build you an MVP because I know you're going to go fundraising, and like that's it. That'll be the extent of the relationship. Fast forward 6 months, I was CTO. We were on the roadshow raising money. We raised all of our $2 million seed angel round right here in the Triangle. Didn't take a dollar of institutional capital. It was all from angels, network, friends, family. So it was really cool. We built a really organic cap table. We had a really cool product, really cool customers. We were in contract analytics, right? So pulling structured data out of unstructured contract portfolios, credit agreements, things like mortgages, things like that.
Okay.
Made a good run of it, and we shut down in late summer, fall of 2025, so last fall. And then in January, joined Mozilla. Not a company I ever thought I would work for, not a company that I knew was doing anything with AI, but a longtime friend of mine and now my manager, Chris Ross at Mozilla, brought me on and joined the team. And then in the spring of this year, we launched Thunderbolt, which is
Nice.
Mozilla. It's underneath the Thunderbird team. So if you go look at the repository, it's Thunderbird/Thunderbolt, but it's still under the Mozilla flag. An open source, local first, privacy first AI harness across every platform. So yeah, and on that team, I am a staff forward deployed engineer, which is a
Very nice.
kind of a new title in the industry, I think. Not new, but it's become more popular.
Yeah, it feels like something over the last couple of years. And this is, I want to dive into that first. I listening to that story, I feel like we might have to have you back just to talk about sort of the realities of starting a company in the AI area, right? Two guys, there's lots of two guys started a company thing, but what does it mean to do it when you've got these AI tools in your hand, you're out in that space, and we'll have to have you back on and maybe tell that story as well. But yeah, it feels like forward deployed engineering has become this talking point, this buzzword, and I'll be curious as to what exactly you're doing with it. I think a lot of the times we hear it's, companies would like to do things with AI. They sort of have an idea of how to do it, but they're not exactly sure how to integrate it with their business or how to best use the tools around it. And so, forward deploy feels like, it's almost like the Navy SEALs or some group that's going to be embedded with the customer. They're going to get to know their business. They're going to teach them about the technology. They're going to be adapting it as they go. Is that anything like, your world these days?
It is. So I think, there's a lot of times I think the role gets conflated with the titles like solutions engineer, sales architect.
Yep.
And it's similar in that you are definitely part of the sales process, but your job doesn't end once the sale is made. So I know that in some organizations, a solutions engineer is up there until, along with the customer until the day the contract signs. And then, they go through an account executive after that to get their bug fixes and things put onto a sprint calendar. What I honestly think that this role grew out of the full stack engineer. The way I look at it is if, yes, you are embedded in a customer, you're embedded with your sales team. I even do a bit with our marketing team to make sure that everyone is aligned. But when I talk to customers or partners, the conversation in a 15-minute sync can go across the UI. It can go across the backend, the database, architecture, deployment, security, encryption, and then also I get education questions, right? Like, how does this work? What does agent mean? Things like that. So I think it's more full stack engineer with like a sales focus and embedded focus rather than like a solutions or sales engineer. And it's very much even less so a consultant. So I like to think of myself like I'm still a full stack engineer with a focus on like, helping our customers and sitting with them and hearing what they want to do. And there's other aspects of that, but yeah.
Yeah. And that, So I think the part of it that I think resonates with what we've heard a lot is the idea is it is very much some variant of full stack engineer, right? Like you're going to be living in the stack. You're going to be close to it. You're figuring out like, what can you reuse? What has to be new? And then the other part of it, like you said, is kind of wearer of many hats because, the people that you're working with, even though we've been talking about AI and doing stuff with AI for, 3.5 years or however long it's been, it's still a very short learning cycle for a lot of people. And so it's everything from like, what does this do? How can you make it work? How can we educate internal teams? How do we sell teams on the concept of what we're trying to do? So that makes total sense of kind of the way you explain it.
Yeah, and I got to remind myself a lot of time that we live in a bubble, right? Like my team, Brian, I'm sure you as well. Like we're obsessed with this stuff. We're always on. We want to learn what the bleeding edge is. We want to push these tools as far as they can go. But I got on a call with a partner. I think there were 15 or 16 stakeholders on the call, and they ranged from the technical decision makers all the way down to people who would be using this tool every day. And it's not a technical product. So I had to remind myself, like, I live in this bubble. I live and breathe this stuff every day. A lot of the people that I talk to, their exposure to AI might be, ChatGPT or Claude here and there to like format documents or ask a quick one-off question. So yeah, I think part of the role is backing up and like taking the temperature of your stakeholders and be like, do these people need education or do they need implementation?
Yeah, absolutely. I couldn't agree more. I think it's something we've talked about a lot on this show is you can gain a lot of skills very quickly if you sort of completely immerse yourself in it. But the gap between the person that's really immersed in it, they're living with it every day, they're really curious, and the ones who, just are, they're sort of around the fringe of it, or it's not their day to day. Even the gap between those can become really big. And then, the amount of new technology, the amount of new things that are happening across, lots of tools is so broad. It feels like it's nearly impossible to keep up. So yeah, I can imagine from day to day, the people you're talking to are, all over the spectrum in terms of, what they want, what they need, what they think might be possible.
Yeah. And one of the interesting things on that note is I have recently talked to a lot of like local technology leaders within city governments, town governments, like Morrisville, Cary, Raleigh, Wake County. And I'm just curious to learn, like, what are people doing? Like, how's the everyday, state government employees, state agency employees, city agency employee, like waterworks or public utilities, how are they using it, right?
Right.
And it's one of the things that I've learned is, especially in government, and this is probably true in some large private organizations, but there's a tension between being actually allowed to use something like Claude and ChatGPT and having the opportunity to learn about it. Because, it's almost like those two things run orthogonal. It's like I can't put my, Excel sheet from work into Claude because it's banned at work. So I can't learn how to use it or what it's capable of to then go ask, my boss or my boss's boss, like, hey, can we get a license for this? So on the public sector side, it's very, it's kind of stressed in two opposite directions.
Yeah. It reminds me back to, when we were doing this and we were mostly talking about cloud computing in the early days, it was the same sort of thing, right? There was this bubble and this perception of like what Silicon Valley looked like. And then, kind of the further you got away from Silicon Valley, you went through these things that you're like, oh, I can't believe somebody doesn't have access to the tool or they haven't been using it or it's not a part of their strat. But yeah, what you're highlighting is very much a reality. Let's stick around in that space. So as you're thinking about this from a full stack engineer perspective, like what, you came into this with a set of sort of technical background and skills and you're doing stuff day to day. Which of the things that were sort of pre-AI are you still using a lot of? What are some of the new things that you've had to do from an FDE perspective that's, you weren't doing 2 years ago or something like that?
Good question. I mean, I only started doing, I don't know if the question is like, which technical things am I using, but also like from a skill set, I was doing a lot of selling when I was running my company. And I tell my boss a lot, it's nice to have customers to actually sell to because as a founder, you're going out and doing cold emailing. I will say one place that I'm starting to get a lot sharper on is actually building out, like when I ran my company, we were cowboys about implementation. Like you tell us where, you tell us when, we'll meet you there and we'll do it. Right. And working for somebody like Mozilla, the risk is way higher. You're going to do it right. And you're going to do it right the first time. So I think like something that I wasn't really doing and now I'm doing a lot of is thinking through like, this is new technology that we're going to deploy. There are risks inherent to like using non-deterministic software just inherently. And these are customers who their brands value are very valuable. How are we going to deploy it and get it right the first time? So as an FDE, I think that's one of the things that I've really been trying to sharpen, like in my toolbox, is the planning. Because like planning on implementation, planning on deployment, because I'm still kind of like a cowboy when it comes to that stuff. I'm like, oh, we'll just set you up a POC. Let's build you a sandbox environment. Here's a login. Go for it. Like try and break it.
Yeah.
As far as technologies, I would say my day-to-day is still the same. Like it's just augmented. And I think that's where I'm comfortable right now. Like I don't like passing a task off to Claude Code or something and like letting it run for 4 hours, coming back and like, merging a PR or asking for a review. It's still like a very senior developer who sits next to me. And that's really the primary way my workflow has changed, aside from like speeding up research, which is really nice.
Okay. You're not, they didn't drop you into like an office space that's just nothing but vibe coders that have never done this stuff before. And
no, I remember when we launched, so we open sourced Thunderbolt in April or May, and we were on the front page of Hacker News for like a couple hours. And I remember one of the top people have like a love-hate relationship with Mozilla. And one of the top comments was like, nobody asked for this vibe-coded piece of bullshit or whatever. And I was like, oh man, like go look at the commits. I promise it's not that.
Yeah.
But
yeah. Well, and that's, that's just sort of a byproduct of not so much Mozilla as just the industry right now is people aren't exactly sure, what stuff has gone through all that sort of normal engineering rigor and thought process, and what was, put together in 2 hours because somebody saw a thread on Reddit and they were like, oh, I could do that. I could just put that together really quickly. So it is interesting though that, the thing that you're evolving around is really like structure and thinking about it. And I don't mean that in like, oh, okay, you went from startup to other stuff, and so things get slow. I mean, the reality with AI is like, you're dealing with people's data. So there's got to be a lot of thought about like, where does it go? Should it go in this model? What are we combining it with? GPU usage and tokens aren't cheap. So, if you're not getting stuff right, like you can experiment a lot, but, at some point, you're going to experiment your way out of the number of tokens you have. So yeah, it makes sense that evolution is sort of naturally happening as you're working on bigger things.
Yeah, and our partner DeepSet, based in the EU, who is they're kind of a channel partner, a distribution partner for us. We're working really closely with them to be the front end for their pipelines. A lot of these customers in the EU are under a tremendous amount of scrutiny compared to the customers in the US, right?
Oh
yeah.
And
there's the AI Act. There's extensive data security, data governance rules, which makes Thunderbolt a natural fit, given that we're pretty sovereign.
Yeah, no, sovereignty, especially when you get in the EU and to a certain extent in APAC, it's the first conversation, as opposed to being like, oh yeah, like we'll kind of put it at the end and so forth. So talk to me about Thunderbolt and talk to me about sort of the work you're doing with harnesses. So kind of give me a sense of like the scope of what problem it's trying to solve and sort of how it works and how people are starting to think about implementing it.
Yep. Yeah. So Thunderbolt runs on any device where you can currently use AI. So if you're browser, desktop, phone, iOS, Android, Linux, anywhere you want to use it, you can do that. It's also local first. So what we're about to release right now is a way to use it completely without a backend. So it's completely standalone, and it will sync to all of your devices. So if you were to see the interface, you'd be like, oh, this is another, open web UI, or this is another Libre chat or ChatGPT style interface. And from the face, it is. You have your niceties, add your own MCP servers, add your own models, whether they're local or remote, bring your own key, all of that. But what we're really trying to do is, originally we thought that this was going to be a consumer application. And we have some popularity, like people who have the acumen to, clone a repo, build it locally, use it. But what we're finding is this like modular interoperability that was the part of the original thesis is very attractive to enterprise customers. Reason being, they have, their own agents that they've built, and they want to be able to connect them using ACP, or they built their own MCP servers. They want to just drop them in and treat Thunderbolt as nothing more than an interface. I think that there's still some ambiguity. People will disagree with me on this. This might be a hot take. There's a little bit of ambiguity right now between the term harness and like what is otherwise a front end. And there's some blur there. I would call Thunderbolt more of a harness just because it's interoperable, but specifically for agentic work. Okay. Not just a pretty front end with some like opaque back end. So That's the core of the product. We're also partnered with a company called Tinfoil, which provides confidential compute, which they're also a partner of Red Hat, which is cool.
Okay.
So in a future version, we're going to be able to offer confidential compute. So we have no idea right now what you're sending if you use the Thunderbolt backend, and soon will be cryptographically attestable that we truly have no clue.
Yeah. Now, when you talk about things being local, and again, you sort of said like it can run on anything. Is it assuming that like you're running something like Olama and you've grabbed some model, you could have grabbed Quen or something, something that's going to fit on any given machine, or does local mean something different because you're going after like sort of team-based use cases and collaborative stuff? Does that make sense? Like, does it mean, is it something that like I'm going to run on my laptop, or is it something that like the IT group's going to set up because, this group's going to run 30 agents that are going to do a bunch of autonomous tasks, or is it a combination of both?
Combination of both. So we have people internal Mozilla who have, they're definitely like tinkerers and have home labs and run Gemma 4 or Quen, at home and use Thunderbolt and just connect to a local endpoint. And then with some customers, some partners, we're exploring like they're going to stand up a very, very serious like hardware infrastructure and something scalable and run a very serious open source model or even a private model that they've trained. So both ends of the spectrum. And then obviously, if you want to drop in the, your Anthropic API key and connect to Opus 4.8, the frontier model at Anthropic's API endpoint, and go for it. So really anything.
Okay. Nice. So as you're engaged with people, you're doing sort of FDE tasks. What is, what are the problems they're sort of solving where, this implementation of harness, makes sense? Like what are they trying to guardrail around? What are they trying to build personalities around? Like what are some of the most common types of use cases you're seeing sort of in the early implementation days?
Yeah. So it is early, but I would say that there's this transition right now. There's almost a gradient where, okay, people, your median information worker, if I'll say that at like an organization, large organization, they're now comfortable with the idea of interacting with an LLM. They tried ChatGPT or Claude. It's cool. It can learn a lot. It can do a lot. They're comfortable with that. And now they're starting to transition into, yeah, but I want it to do something, right? I don't want it to like tell me how to, create this Excel formula. I wanted to open Excel and I wanted to make these changes and email me the, finished PowerPoint or this finished Excel sheet. That's where we're going. So I would say as an enterprise, if you are, or an organization, a large private organization, if you're looking to transition away from like informational Q&A and off to like execution, like agentic execution, having agents work for you and do things for you, I think it's a great time to start considering a harness and how you can bring a harness into the fold, into the stack.
Yeah. And how do you, if you're putting your, maybe not your sales hat on, but your sort of explaining hat on, like, how are you explaining it to people? Like, what are the conversations tend to be where people are like, oh, okay, cool. That's where I should start. Like you said, like they're starting to do execution tasks, but like what are the questions they're asking sort of before that? And then once they get going, like what are they, what's the learning curve tend to look like? As far as like, okay, cool. How do I take my day job and like put it into this thing? Or how do I start thinking about, processes that are like agentic first, where I'm like, oh, I don't have to think about 4 people being in the loop. I can just kind of move through stuff. Like what do those conversations tend to look like? And where do people get hung up, and where, what are the light bulb moments?
So I think, as is classic with anything in tech, we're famously and traditionally bad at naming things. It's like, I think the second hard problem in computer science, naming things. We have a bit of a branding crisis, I think, across AI. Agents, harnesses, models, like it's, unless you were here originally, it gets confusing.
Okay.
So that is something that I like to take a step back and help people understand, like shelve those terms, shelve those concepts for a second. And I can help you figure out if you need to get there or not. A good question, a good place to start is like, what do you wish these traditional tools did, right? Like do you just use ChatGPT or something like that, or whatever model or whatever tool, just to like ask questions, get an answer, and go about your day, like your professional day? Then maybe like an agentic harness isn't the way to go. Maybe your needs might be met by just treating LLMs as like a Q&A system. Or is there a task that you do every day that you could explain to somebody like me who has no idea how to do it? Like, I'm not in the insurance industry, but you could tell me how to, fill out a vendor onboarding, worksheet or form. Oh yeah, I spend 12 hours of my week doing that. Okay, well then maybe it's time we start experimenting with like building out a simple agent on your behalf. And that's where DeepSet has been tremendously valuable, because they build the agents and then Thunderbolt's the front end.
Okay.
But those are how those conversations go. It's like, if you have a piece of work or a part of your day that is monotonous, repeatable, all of the inputs, then it's time to say, okay, let's try building an agent, and then we need a harness to connect it to. So why not Thunderbolt?
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, and that's kind of really what I was curious about, because again, I think you're very right in that there's a lot of things that, in general, technologists are bad at naming things, but there's a lot of things that get lumped into stuff. So you hear the term agent, you hear the term harness, and in my mind, I'm always like, okay, well, what does that mean to you? What does your thing do? Because no two may not necessarily be the same. They might be doing different stuff, and so yeah, I was very curious as to were you coming around to just getting to the point of saying, like, what is your role? What does your task do? How would you map that out? Does it make sense to now start to use this second technology as opposed to just what you could do in a chatbot? Okay, it becomes like, use a chatbot. Then maybe there's another tool that you use, and you're like, oh, that tool connects to these four things that right now you're just copying, pasting stuff to. Or, every time you get to this stage, you send an email off, that could just happen automatically. But, you may not, for things like that, you might be like, well, I don't need a full-blown harness, or I don't need all, but yeah, so I like the way you explained that. It was, let's forget about the names so much as let's get into what you're trying to do. How do you do it today? And then let's start thinking about, okay, where could technology start to augment what you're trying to do?
And and we're still so obviously early. Like, it's indicative by the naming of things. We're so early because, like Sarah at Progressive, who's the senior claims manager, is not going to go click on add MCP server, type in a WebSocket endpoint or an endpoint.
Right.
And like, she's just not because she couldn't figure out how to do it, but it's just that, like, come on, like, we all know that that's not how it's supposed to be. Nobody's cracked the code yet of how to like obfuscate and abstract truly all of this away. I know like the frontier labs are getting close. Like, they have better branding, like Claude Cowork, Claude Design, where under the hood it's taking advantage of these things. And that's one day where I'd like to see Thunderbolt go.
Yeah.
But yeah, the names are a symptom of we haven't figured all of this out yet.
Well, and I think it keeps coming back to this thing that I keep highlighting whenever I hear that, some company is like, oh, we decided to lay off people because of AI. And I keep coming back to being like, I'm betting in most cases, most of the people in your company still have no idea really how to use it. Because to a certain extent, to be a pretty good powerful user, you needed a little bit of programming skills, a little bit of, some techie, you needed some sort of techie stuff, like you know what an IP address looks like, or what an FQDN looks like, or what an API looks like. And I'm like, you could pair together some of your techies that you might be like, well, they're underpowered as a software programmer, but if I could pair them up with Sarah, who works in the claims department, like, you might create a superhero out of that, right? Like, if you take the person who knows the business domain, you marry them with somebody who has got enough technical stuff to be like, okay, cool, I analyzed what you did. Let me set that up for you, or build you something. And maybe that is exactly what FDE is doing. But it does feel like this marriage of two domains that maybe in the past thought of themselves as different, but now the tools and the technology are sort of making them intertwined in pretty powerful ways.
Yeah. No, I think you're exactly right. And I think, right now the commercial value of an FDE makes sense because there's like, there's a lot of value. There's a lot of sales to be made, to be candid, and you want to put your engineers in front of the customer, with the customer, teaching them how to use it. But I do hope that there becomes an equal pattern, like the internal version, like what you were talking about, the internal FDE. I don't know a good name, internal deployed engineer. Or I mean, Mozilla is a tech company, but I can see it, again, progressive, to use the example. Have some of your engineers become internally deployed. Go work with the claims department, go sit with them, go learn what their job is, because there's probably something there. There's probably something to teach them, and I'm sure you'll learn something from them as well.
Right. Okay. Well, cool. I'm going to wrap up because I know you're busy and you've got a lot going on. If you were to give kind of folks guidance, whether they're going like, oh, FDE sounds like kind of cool. I've been doing some full stack stuff, or I've been doing some platform engineering stuff for a while, but I want to get more into AI. Or you've now been through this for a little while. You've gone through some career changes. Like, what would you suggest to those folks as far as being like, hey, this is kind of a great way to extend your skills, or this is some stuff you should be looking at to be really effective at this type of role?
Just general advice: don't start a company. That's a good place to begin. You'll learn a lot, but don't do it unless you really hate yourself. No, so there's this balancing act to do, I think, right now in the industry. If you're in any technical role and you want to get in front of the customer, do not get married. So there's two pieces of it. Do not get no. I that was I paused at the wrong point. Do not get married to any technology, is what I was going to say, or any standard or any protocol. I made that mistake when I was building the first version of our platform, Limelight. I was like, oh yeah, RAG, this is it. There's no possible way we can improve on RAG. Like, it'll be the special sauce on top, but like RAG is it. There's so many better ways to do things like that. I mean, now we have knowledge bases, memory is becoming the hot new thing. So don't get stuck on one thing because it works kind of well. Constantly be learning about what else is out there. But again, don't spend too much time like spinning your wheels on trying to learn every new thing. So to sum it up in one, I would say, and my boss, Chris at Mozilla, has an uncanny ability to do this. The better you get at being able to discern something that's going to stick versus something that's like kind of cool and interesting and is going to be like front page for a couple of days, the more valuable you're going to be. Like Chris picked out agent client protocol from like early on and was like, this is where we need to go. And it's paid off in spades for implementing that in Thunderbolt. So if you can sharpen that sword, you're going to do very, very well.
Yeah, no, I would agree. We've always said, like, to succeed in this industry, you've got to have a natural level of curiosity. You're just kind of like, you're constantly sort of looking around the corner, like what's potential, what's next. And then, I think you're exactly right. It's you have to have the discipline to say, when new things come along, I'm going to go evaluate them. But, unless, like you said, you just absolutely, know for a fact that it's going to be the thing, you have to be able to sort of come off that belief, or that like, oh, I love this thing because so many new things have come along, and you have to be flexible enough to be like, okay, cool. I'm fine leaving that thing behind and taking on that new thing. So no, I think that's great advice. And especially in a super fast moving pace like we are right now, I think back to stuff we were talking about a year ago and 2 years ago, and we're like, oh yeah, no one does that anymore. That's, new stuff has come along. So, well, very cool stuff. Well, Jordan, thank you for coming on. I think, it's really good for us to just get a chance to talk to people who are, living this stuff, that are, kind of in the trenches. Exciting stuff, especially for people that are, starting to look at sovereignty. If sovereignty is either something that you're interested in, or is sort of being pushed on you because of laws and regulations. It's cool that, the things that you're building with Thunderbolt are emerging and so forth. So, and we'll definitely have to have you back at some point to, if willing, talk about some of the challenges of building a company, or maybe we'll just do that over a local beer or something like that. But, well, listen, thanks for being on the show. We really appreciate it, folks. We appreciate Jordan's time today and giving us some very, very valuable insight. Hope you enjoyed it. Thank you all for listening. Thanks for telling a friend about the show, helping us grow the community. And with that, we'll wrap it up, and we'll talk to you next week.
Thanks for listening. Check us out at theenterpriseaishow.com for past shows, newsletters, and all things enterprise AI.